niggas like to suck new dick.
Officer friendly, gonna kill your motherfucking ass dead. A taser, a boot, a bullet to your motherfucking head. The gang all joins in. A murder but no goddamn sin. Believe your eyes or what you are fed. With me now, officer friendly, gonna kill your motherfucking ass dead. A taser, a boot, a bullet to your motherfucking head. The gang all joins in. A murder but no goddamn sin. Believe your eyes or what you are fed.
Eat, fuck, kill.
Eat, fuck, kill. Eat, fuck, kill. Welcome, everyone. This is episode 4 of Eat, Fuck, Kill, the podcast, and I am the host of Eat, Fuck, Kill, Masavana Satori Wabi-Sabi. Thanks for checking us out. I've got a lot of stuff I got to get off my chest in episode 4, and I've already recorded one version of episode 4, and I decided to scrap it and try it again, which is why there's been a bit of a delay in episode 4. I'll get it out of the way right out front that I recently had dental reconstruction surgery of a pretty complicated sort, which included having some titanium screws drilled into my jaw. And about 3.5, 4 weeks out of it now, so I'm back at a point where it's not affecting my speech so much. You'll note that I'm struggling with certain sounds, and that's going to go on for another month or two while I go through a process I'm in the early part of. Tonight, I'm going to start out. I want to introduce you to a gentleman that, to him, it was very important that I introduce you to him. It was very important to him. And the gentleman I'd like to introduce you to tonight is a man named Clyde Kerr III. Now, Mr. Clyde Kerr III made a series of videos before he passed. And in these videos, he gives you his opinion on the world. Now, Clyde Kerr III was a father. He had 2 sons, one of which, the youngest, being a 13-year-old boy. And on February 1st of this year, Clyde Kerr III, who was a deputy and a police officer with Lafayette Parish Police, right outside of his parish office, shot himself in the head and committed suicide. We're going to look tonight at 4 videos that Clyde Kerr III made. I'm going to piece them together. What we're going to do tonight is break down and kind of honor the last wishes of Deputy Clyde Kerr III. Now, if you saw episode 1 of Eat, Fuck, Kill, the podcast, you're probably aware that I have some issues with the police department and the justice system in this country. So it may surprise you that I want to honor the last wishes of a police officer. But when you hear what Clyde Kerr has to say, and almost as importantly, the way he says it, you may understand a little bit. And we're going to go through it all tonight in a podcast that partially honors the wishes of Clyde Kerr III, who made a series of videos before shooting himself outside his own police department in Louisiana on February 1st of this year, 2021. Now, I don't know Clyde Kerr III at all. I did not know him at all, but I've watched every video that I could find that included him. The first of which was available. He made anyway on May 31st of 2020, just days after the death or murder of George Floyd. And while Clyde Kerr III made that video in the late days of May of 2020, as far as I can tell, it wasn't released till after his death. So while as far back as May after the death of George Floyd, Clyde Kerr was starting to feel some kind of way. He didn't want anybody in the world to know it, or didn't feel comfortable with putting it out there to the world until after his death. So Clyde Kerr, unquestionably, what he was feeling and the things he expresses in these videos are things he didn't feel safe sharing with anyone, or with very few people, and didn't trust the world with it. And maybe as you watch it tonight, you can debate within your own self whether or not he was right in not trusting the world with the things that we're going to look at in this video tonight. And in the comments, I'm going to link each of the 4 videos that we're going to kind of look through tonight. And they'll be in the right order, the same order that we look at them here in the show. And they'll be complete. The ones we're going to look at in the show are edited. I've cut out and just taken portions here and there. But the complete videos will be down in the comments. It brings me no joy to talk tonight with you about the death of Clyde Kerr, because in watching these videos, digging in a bit into this man's life, I'm left with little doubt that while his methods in some cases may not be the best, this was an honorable man, and this was a man who meant well and did good in almost all instances. He was an Army veteran, served in theater in both Iraq and Afghanistan. For the last few years of his life, he was a school resource officer at an elementary school and a middle school. And he, in his own words, in one of the videos, he talks about how it was the perfect job for him, protecting kids, and he loved the job and he took it very seriously. Throughout these videos, Clyde Kerr talks about the systemic racism and the police violence that goes unchecked over and over in this country. And he shares with you many things that maybe will help you understand while none of these videos were released until after his death. In the timeline of the videos, as he gets closer, because he plans it out for over a week, his death, and he knows he's going to do it, and he kind of hints throughout the videos, hints strongly, without ever saying, I'm going to go commit suicide, hints strongly and makes it clear that that's what his intentions are. Throughout the videos, there's things that he shares that are undeniably problematic for me. He goes on a transphobic rant that lasts a good 15 seconds, which kind of springboards me into the second problem I have, is that, and I don't know how much of it I'm going to get to, but I definitely will share with you the parts that kind of fit within the theme we're looking for tonight. But he suggests in the videos on multiple occasions, like he was, like God was telling him to do it, or some higher power or some entity was telling him to do this. But for anyone out there, I don't want it that to diminish what Clyde Kerr did, and I haven't got to it yet, but after the George Floyd killing, he contemplated resigning from the police force because he's struggling a great deal with the racial inequality and systemic inequalities all throughout this country. And he felt like he was on the wrong side. In the course of the videos, he breaks down many of the systemic issues that many of us have been calling for change on for years and years. But he definitely calls it for what it is. These aren't, a random series of acts. This is a racist, systemic extermination. He doesn't use that word. That's mine. But that's what it is. He also shares with you the first experience he ever had, or first encounter he ever had as a young black man with the police. And it wasn't good, and it kind of shaped him a lot. And he gets into that some in the video. While I'm going to honor the final wishes of Deputy Clyde Kerr III tonight, I have no misconceptions that he was a perfect man or didn't make mistakes. He was obviously had some issues. Let he who hasn't fucked up a million times cast the first stone. Now, in the first video we're going to look at tonight, this is Deputy Clyde Kerr in late May of 2020, making the first video that he really ever made to be put online. And this is just days after the death of George Floyd. And you can see that this is an emotionally tormented man. Through all his imperfections, you can see that the injustices that he witnesses on a daily basis pain him dearly. And that we're going to look at this first video here. Like I said, this video was recorded in late May of 2020. And he goes into some detail in his feelings. This is the longest of all the videos he made. The entirety of this video is over 45 minutes. We're going to look at a couple of spots, and I'm going to break in intermittently to comment on different things that he's speaking on. And episode 3 of Eat, Fuck, Kill the podcast, episode 3, I laid out 2 grand journeys, 2 epic trails. One was a backpacking trip about 75 or so-ish miles along the Appalachian Trail through the Rhone Highlands. And the second trip was a backpacking and hiking trip, but done kind of moving from spot to spot with a car through national forest and giant redwood forests and Death Valley. We're going to do star watching at one of the most remarkable locations in the country. And I have you going to taking a hike in a giant redwood forest, and you're going to camp in Kennedy Meadows, hike along the Pacific Crest Trail, and of course visit Mount Whitney. And that was the second trip I laid out among the 2 grand journeys. And I want to encourage someone out there, because I was of the belief when I made episode 3 of the podcast, and I still to this day think it's the case, that one person can do that trip for $1,000 and have the experience of a lifetime for $1,000. And almost every adult American's about to get handed $1,400. And I want to challenge somebody out there to take that journey. Try to do it for $1,000. Depending on where you are, you might or might not be able to do it. And if you're close enough, you could probably do it for less. But particularly if you have a lot of the equipment already. Take that grand journey down Highway 395, visit the ghost towns, do the night of stargazing. So somebody out there, take that trip. Do it for less than $1,000 if you can at all. And report back on what your experience is and if it is truly a grand journey. But let's get right into it. This is the first video made in late May of 2020 of Deputy Clyde Kerr III.
Warning. You're gonna have to bear with me. I've never done any kind of live streaming videos, so just bear with me, because I got some stuff I gotta share. Just that's been on my heart as of late. I'm gonna be all over the place. I'm probably gonna ramble, but my thoughts are so congested right now. that this is the only kind of catharsis that it is to actually, at least in my mind, bring some relief to all of this. So I had to have the talk with my son. And this is the thing about it. The talk you're thinking about, that would have actually been easy. I can explain that. That's birds, bees, biology. So he asked me, Daddy, who's George Floyd? I was like, I can't sequester him from this any longer. So, and I think it's age appropriate. He's a young man. He's 13. You know, it's a rip. I had to have a conversation with him. I can't protect him anymore. And those who are parents know how impotent and just helpless you feel when you know that your kid is just only so much you could do for him. I couldn't explain it. I'm like, and he sat and watched it, that video in Minneapolis in its entirety. And the thing about it is that I can kind of deal with that, but even that still struck a chord and that cut deep with me. But what hurt me the most is that having to explain this to him, I could tell he lost a piece of his innocence. I can tell you that without a fact, without a doubt in my mind. Emphatically, I can tell you that. I know my child, as you should know your children. So I couldn't explain it to him, you know, and it just, I'm like, I was at a loss for words, and that's actually a rarity for me. But it was chilling to have to watch and go through that and try and explain that to him. Even more so because my child, he sees me put on a uniform every day. I don't claim to be no subject matter expert on anything, but I still have a moral compass, and it's not completely askewed. There is no way that those people's actions or what they did is completely indefensible. Completely. I can't even explain it, to the point that it's been vexing my spirit as a person, just having to do this and still go on and deal with normal adult stuff. This is something different, y'all, and I just hope that y'all recognize this, because if y'all don't see that there is a systemic problem that is plaguing us, and this is not just about skin tone, melanin, whatever, you know, whatever tribe you're claiming, cool. We're all grafted into one tribe, supposedly, that's a whole nother story. But point being is, there is definitely something wrong with how we view each other. And this is the thing about it, how his life was just so cavalierly extinguished. The dude's calling out for his mother, somebody who is going in total, like 10th year of law enforcement. If you got somebody in the prone, handcuffed, on their stomach, and you can't control them, you are using the wrong tactics. Point blank. So you're telling me it takes three people, to subdue an already handcuffed dude? It's deplorable. It's deplorable. There's no other word for it. I'm not going to bite my tongue on it. There's a lot of stuff boiling up inside of me and whatnot, but there's no excuse for that. There's no excuse for that. And what's more troubling is that seems to be the norm. I've really been questioning myself. Had I been in Minneapolis on a vacation or just visiting somebody and would have saw that, you're obligated as a person, as a human being, to do something about that. You can't govern morality to people. You just can't do it. Vice, all of that other stuff, you cannot do it. You can't. You have a moral obligation to not let something like that happen in front of you. because I just can't internalize this anymore. I have lost sleep behind this.
I want to touch on that last point he made first. You have a duty to not stand by and watch when something like that happens. That's what Deputy Clyde Kerr III says there. And in a sense, I completely agree. But with the enormous caveat that doing so almost definitely assures your demise, your death. If someone would have tried to tackle Derek Chauvin or shove him off of George Floyd, that person would have been shot dead on the spot, or that's what I believe how that plays out. It's also clear to me from this clip that Deputy Clyde Kerr III was a pained man, and that the death of George Floyd impacted him tremendously like it did so many. From the time of this video forward, Deputy Clyde Kerr III, and we'll see more about this as we get into further clips, felt very much like he was on the wrong side. He also mentions how George Floyd's life was so, quote, cavalierly extinguished, and how it seemed like the norm, like he had done it before. And right towards the end of that clip, he mentions that there's lots, quote, lots of stuff boiling up inside me. That's what he says. And as we go through these videos tonight, we'll learn a little more about what exactly it was that was boiling up inside Deputy Clyde Kerr III. He also, in that clip, talked at length about the talk he had to have with his 13-year-old son about the death of George Floyd and the larger topic, I'm sure, of his own protection during interactions with police. There is not a reform big enough for the monstrosity that is the U.S. justice system. Tonight we're looking at the newest member of the justice system is shit club, Deputy Clyde Kerr III. Let's take a look at some more.
And this is keeping it real. We literally are hanging on by a thread. Like, it is ingrained in me to want to protect people and actually do it. So that's why I have such an issue with this, because we are not doing that. We are losing the faith in just the basic trust of our populace. And the thing I've learned, it's taken me up to these 43 years to understand this. Trust is something, once it's broken, incredibly difficult to repair. I don't know, man. This has been. I've had some rough times in my life, but this last week has been a lot to have to absorb. I don't know. Like I said, we have to do a lot better than what we've been doing, man. Because this is just ridiculous. And I'm challenging everybody I know who's in law enforcement right now. If you don't speak up and say something against this, like actually against it, and just validate the fact that we're having problems, if you don't condemn what took place, I'm unfriending you. I'll give you to Friday. You got to put something up, because silence is consent, and I am not. I can't abide by that. I can't abide by that. It's just there's no way possible that anything I can every fiber of my being is not going to let me do nothing like that.
And while that's noble, you and I both know that's not enough, because the system is choked with corruption and greed from the very top down. Do you really think that these murders and all the illegal searches and the drug wars, do you really think this shit would still be going on if the powers that be didn't want it to be going on? So no matter what they say in their little bullshit campaign promises, when the rubber meets the road, we're still in the heat of a drug war. To raise the spirits of his viewers, Clyde Kerr III opens up that third segment there by mentioning that we're hanging on by a thread, and that police do not deserve the trust that they should have with the community because they're not earning it. He also mentions how they should be protectors, and I quote, they are not doing that. All throughout this clip, you can see The emotions just pouring out of this man as he acknowledges that all of his coworkers are part of a rigged game. Also in this clip, this man, this 43-year-old man who served in wars in both Afghanistan and Iraq and had been a cop for many years, indicates that this week, when he's speaking, the week surrounding the death of George Floyd, was as tough a week as he had ever had. Here's the next clip of Deputy Clyde Kerr from the same footage, May of 2020.
And please understand this, there's a difference between commanding respect and demanding respect. Two different things. Two completely different things. If you was a punk in high school and got picked on and thrown in the lockers, you're going to be a punk with a badge. There's no two ways about it. There's no two ways about it. And the fact that you can assert your will on somebody, the gravity of that, there's nothing worse than that. Nobody likes cops. Everybody loves firefighters.
Nobody likes cops. Everybody likes firefighters. That's what he says there. And I want to take for a moment a look at that closer, because there's some reasons for that. And here's a big one. When a firefighter shows up on the scene of what he's responsible for, a fire or whatever the case might be on that call, when he assesses the scene, ultimately what he does after that assessment is if there's people in danger, that's going to be his first priority, help the people in danger. And he's going to take all the danger of the situation on that scene and try to put as much of it as possible on his own shoulders, his or her own shoulders, that firefighter. If there's somebody trapped in a room and he has to rush into a burning building to try to save them, that's what he's going to do. He's going to take as much of the danger of the situation, and the firefighter is going to assume that danger for themselves. Whereas with a police officer, and we've seen this many, many times, they come upon the scene and any danger within the scene is immediately passed from the police officers to the citizens around them. Oh, you might do something bad, so I'm afraid of you, and you could do something bad, so I'm afraid of you, so now I got to shoot you both or arrest you both or whatever the fuck. So while firefighters are taking the dangers in most situations upon their own shoulders, police officers take the dangers, generally speaking, in situations and pass it off to the citizenry around them. And it's repugnant. And then there was, of course, the court decisions that were made over a period of time where it has long since been decided in this country that whole serve and protect thing is long gone based on court decisions. It's no longer a police officer's job to serve and protect. It is their job to enforce the law. So they don't care if you're dying, but they'll wait and then arrest the guy who killed you, because their job is to enforce the law, not protect you. The court case that led to that decision, you should look into that, and I'll share some information with you about it on the screen, because what the cops did in that case was absolutely terrible, and it resulted in an apartment full of women being held hostage for days and traumatized horribly. And it led to a court case where it was decided that the cops, it's not their job to protect you, only to enforce the law. And then after that court case, it started to fade away, and you still see it occasionally, but it's gone on a lot of cop cars now, because it ain't their job to serve and protect you. Ain't what they do. Here's the next clip of Deputy Clyde Kerr from the same footage, May of 2020.
That was summer of '99. Lead instructor was a Francis Green. Told me something that completely changed my mind. Even at the age of 22, when I turned 22 in the academy, I was able to absorb this. We serve at the pleasure of the public. By general consensus, we've all entered into this whole thing, this contractual thing called society, and we say we're going to play by the rules for the most part. Put it to you like this. The first time I ever dealt with Jefferson Parish Police was at the Lakeside Mall, and it was a Hispanic deputy. And granted, we were kids. We were hanging out in the parking lot, being loud, causing attention, doing what kids do. Gets out, told us to disperse, but we were being loud. Plus, he had a heavy accent. Couldn't understand him. I was like, "What did you say?" And I understand my tone probably was not the best, but I wasn't meaning it in any kind of malicious or I wasn't trying to go against the grain or challenge his authority. But looks at me, proceeds to get out, pull out a PR-24, hit me in my solar plexus, and I was like, okay, all right, well, this is real. The bad ones are making our job a lot harder. You really are. Like my spirit is vexed behind all of this, you know, because I got to put on the normal face of being a dad when I come home, get on daddy detail. You can't tell me that what he did to that man, he valued life. And he's fractured inside. That whole hurt people, I get that. There's no way you can justify that. There's no way. There's no way. I challenge, I will have this conversation with anybody. And if you do, something is wrong with you as a person if you think you can defend that. But it's cool. I appreciate it for the simple fact of you were really seeing people's true nature come out. But I do know that my moral compass is not that askew to say that what I saw transpire was not anything else but murder. So I can't not say anything about that. So. But let me rephrase the situation. Not police officer, not sheriff deputy, peace officer. We are supposed to bring a calm to a situation. When all people lose their minds, everybody can't go crazy at the same time. We have to be that voice that steps in and be like, okay, let's chill. Peace officer. And you cannot expect to have the respect of the population that you're supposed to be protecting if they don't trust you. What if, God forbid, 10 years from now, my son's traveling or one of my loved ones, somebody I hold dear, happens to run across somebody like that in the same mindset?
He also there in clip 2 makes a clear delineation between a peace officer and a police officer, and he shows you his standards of training book to indicate that it's a peace officer standards of training book, not a sheriff's deputy or a police officer, but a peace officer. And he makes that distinction to go on to say how they should bring calm to a situation and be the one in a crazy situation that doesn't lose their head, yet they continually seem to be the escalators of these situations, and they show up and start poking at everybody and see if anybody looks at them cross and then immediately attack them. And then again, act like they're the put upon party. Y'all got some of the fucking creepiest, biggest balls in the world, y'all cops and your unions. And he also mentions here, and I want to kind of comment on the difference between demanding respect and commanding respect. And he makes a fine point there because he's talking to police officers when he's talking about that. And this idea that no matter what they do or how they behave, you're supposed to bow your head and get on your knee in their mere presence. And while their behavior doesn't really warrant any respect in many cases. I'm thankful that he pointed that out because I think every cop in America needs to hear that. If you were a punk before you had a badge, you're going to be a punk when you have a badge. Quote from Clyde Kerr III. I enjoyed that very much and just wanted to echo that quote from Mr. Kerr. And finally, from that same clip, and this is a really, really important point that he makes, and I want to take a moment to kind of dig into it. He talks about how police officers try to just assert their will over people, and how he feels as if they do not recognize the gravity of a situation like that. You know, there's a whole population that's struggling with their own kind of PTSD from being thrown in a cage at some point in their life for absolute bullshit, having all their money taken from them, having cars and money and cash and shit taken from them for absolute bullshit. Hat tip to Tanaha, Texas, that town which essentially had a huge theft ring on their highways run by their police department down there. They were jacking people's RVs, boats, cars, trucks, cash, jewelry, shit, anything they could yank off. They were totally jacking people traveling through that town. And they were looking for outsiders, anybody with a license plate that didn't say Texas. And you get that a lot in this country and have for a long time. The way police officers have found such comfort in just degrading and demeaning and physically abusing the public is completely out of line. And it's what Clyde's talking about here with this assert your will point. And they say that about themselves a lot, the sheep and the wolf and all that shit. They consider themselves the protectors of the sheep and we're just the sheep. And fuck that. I ain't no sheep and I don't need no herder. And if that's what you think your role is, then you're sadly mistaken. And I hope enough of us can come together in agreement with that concept to get rid of it. It's the whole warrior idea. They call themselves warriors. Well, warriors fight wars. Who the fuck are you at war with, Mr. Officer? Who is your enemy combatant? Do tell. Because from the looks of videos I've been watching for damn near 2 decades now, looks like it's the American people. And aren't you courageous to fight a multi-decade war against an unarmed people that don't know they're at war? If this weren't true, we wouldn't have people piled up from sea to shining sea that have either been incarcerated, are on probation, parole, whatever the fuck. It's outrageous. You would think we were the worst collections of humans ever put on the earth, the way we feel the need to lock each other up like animals all the time. And I touched on it in episode 1. It's a lack of respect for freedom itself and where those freedoms come from and the prices that were paid by the people that came before us so that these freedoms might be ours. And to shit on them by taking them away as if they mean nothing is it's deplorable, as Clyde Kerr would say. If there were good cops, there would be no bad cops, because a bad cop is a cop that commits crimes against the people or commits crimes for his own gain. And when they're caught, they should be treated just like everyone else, and they shouldn't be able to be a cop anymore. But instead, they're protected, they're insulated, and they're covered up for. And that, of course, begets more criminal behavior. Once police officers realized that they could do whatever they want, even on camera, and it would seem that no one cares, that was it. Ever since, they've been kids in a candy store beating the shit out of the American people and throwing charges on people that ain't worth 2 cents just to fucking terrorize people. And when whistleblowers come out and say, hey, the entire police department is crooked as a dog's hind legs and corrupt as fuck, they start to attack them, arrest them, and then make them look bad. And it's the oldest con in the book. And when are we going to be tired of this shit? For years, I've wondered how many people on the sides of milk cartons and how many missing persons down at the post office are a result of encounters with police where y'all are so brazen in you feel so safe in doing anything you want and thinking there'll be no repercussions for it. I can't help but think that a lot of the people at the post office on the side of milk cartons for years have been as a result of interactions with y'all when there wasn't a camera rolling and when there wasn't anyone around. And much of it predicated on this idea that it would seem that the law is no longer just to follow the law, but that the cops have this presumed law now that not only do you have to follow the law, but you have to follow the law and kiss their ass and fall to a knee and bow your head in their mere presence, or else they'll find some offense, some fucking charge they can throw at you. Because it was all about, George Floyd was trying to pass a counterfeit $20 bill. Was that true? Was that real? Did that actually happen? Because that's what they theoretically were supposed to be rousting him over. And with no actual evidence that it was him or that he had done it or that it had happened, did they have the counterfeit bill? Because if the police were rousting this guy for passing counterfeit money, they should be able to go get it, right, and produce it. I still hadn't seen it. Where's this counterfeit fucking bill? That's like Eric Garner. They went on and on with Eric Garner about, oh, he's selling Lucy cigarettes. They did not find a single cigarette on that man. Yet that's what they killed him for, because he's selling Lucy cigarettes. Clearly he is not. He doesn't have a fucking cigarette on him, but y'all were so anxious to find a cigarette on him that you were willing to fucking choke him out to death. And then cry like you're the party that's put upon. Fuck you.
Something comes of this, because I see it. It is so blatantly obvious that this was moved around for me to be here to do this. I'm not saying it has to be me, but somebody has to do something. At least to, what is going to really push and motivate us to do better? Like, something's got to jar us back into reality. So I can't think of nothing else that I can do in order to do it other than make a statement. And this is how I plan on making it. Like I said, again, I know it's going to be asked a lot. Like, everything's going to be looked back on. Nobody can say I was ever coarse. And we seem to just be the ones that we get here. What are we pouring into them, man? Our children are watching snuff films, basically people getting killed on the regular, and we're broadcasting it to them like it's the thing to do. We are in error, man, and it pains me that it's gotten to this point. Our lives are purposeful and they're meaningful. The problem is we're not giving them another healthy alternative. Like, I mean, the adults are just as bad. Y'all are the ones who are doing. What are the children seeing? Now, I am not perfect. I am not saying that. I am not perfect. But what I try to do is do right by them. Try to be as good for them as I possibly can, because I would want that for my children.
But I do agree with Deputy Clyde Kerr that this is a pivotal turning point for our society that I don't believe many of us have fully come to recognize yet. And if we don't get a hold, this is one of the biggest problems this country's ever faced. The way we're allowing police officers carte blanche with violence and tyranny. And I can't, for the life of me, figure out what the pack of you who think this is a good idea, like, I know why you say it, because you think you're supposed to, and that's the right thing. But when you look inside yourself and you analyze it individually, I can't fathom what you must say to yourself inside, the shame you must feel about waving flags and rooting on people who are destroying your country and murdering your fellow citizens with impunity, while you play cheerleader to them and think it's your obligation, that you're expected to wave a blue flag and cheer on murderers, when what your obligation really is to fight for your own individual rights and ensure that they remain there, and in the course of doing so, protect the citizenry all around you and their rights as well. Government, I mean, you understand, when you wave that blue flag, you're saying, yay, government. While out of the other side of your mouth saying you don't want big government, you don't like big government, while waving blue flags and screaming for the government and some of the worst of the government. They're hired henchmen. They're armed, hired mercenary thugs whose primary, if not sole purpose, is to protect the interests of the wealthy, the white, and business. And if you doubt that, watch the response of your local police department the next time a bank is getting robbed. And then watch the response of your local police department the next time one of your neighbor's house is getting robbed. And take a look at the resources that they'll deploy when they think a business and the interests of business are at stake versus the resources they'll deploy when they think you and your individual or personal interests are at stake. Same thing goes for your life. Watch what happens when a police officer, a politician, someone representing the state, when their life is taken. Watch the response. When a police officer is killed, they'll send 1,000 cops out in every direction to beat on every door and poke a nightstick into the ribs of every citizen on the street. And then watch that same police department's response when one of your neighbors is murdered. And they'll come out 3 days later, ask a couple of questions, poke around a little bit, and draw an outline around a body. And we all know that police don't solve crimes. They do not solve crimes. They enforce the law. And just look at their clearance rates. And keep in mind with clearance rates, that those clearance rates, which are already abysmally low for almost all crime, but any crime that's actually meaningful, in terms of solving. And what you'll find is that when you include all the confessions that are actual truth and real confessions, when you consider the confessions that they get, all the confessions that they beat out of people, all the people they catch from live camera footage or from witness testimony, and then you put all that and apply it to their clearance rates, and what you find is cops don't solve crimes. They either get witness statements, have video of the crime, witness it themselves, catch the person in the act, but they're not solving an unsolved crime. And finally, in that clip there, he kind of draws a metaphorical line in the sand, saying that if you're not with them and if you don't feel that the cops, there's some big problems with them, then you're the problem and you're not with him and you're on the other side of this issue. And kind of draws a line in the sand on the topic of police reform, or maybe not police reform, but police violence. And here we have, towards the end of this first video, Clyde Kerr making the age-old argument of what about the children? These issues are larger than the children. And, if we're ever going to solve these issues in a way that's meaningful and provides any kind of true justice, we have to start telling ourselves the truth about what the problems are. We have to acknowledge that the full depth of the problem and stare it straight in its eyes and then fix it right. And he also wastes absolutely no time at all getting right to his crux point of what he's going to do and how that would be his notice to his employers. So he pulls no punches and wastes no time getting right to the point in this one. And you can see he's now in uniform in his police car for this video. And he closes out that clip there by talking about how he has now figured out what his purpose is. And for the first time, kind of foreshadowing that he believes his purpose now is to commit suicide, shoot himself in the head outside of his sheriff's office as a protest to police tyranny, corruption, and violence. This is a struggling man, and a man who's been struggling for a long time not with problems of his own, but with problems of the world. And that the problems that he saw in the world around him troubled him to such a degree that led to these videos. You'll also note that in this clip, Deputy Kerr also is back on the children and what they're seeing, and how the adults are setting a terrible example for children, and we're essentially handing dysfunction down generation to generation at this point, is what he implies. Also in that clip, Deputy Kerr laments the way we treat each other and the way we see each other. Just another message from Deputy Kerr that maybe we could take a moment to consider, since he paid such an enormous price, hoping that we might listen to what he had to say. Furthermore, he mentions in this clip how we need to provide better avenues for children as they look to the future, and that we need to fill the lives of children with more meaningful activities than we are currently doing. He also goes on to mention how important it is to him to be a good example to the kids that he worked with or interacted with on a daily basis.
Let's deal with what we're dealing with here in the here and now before we start expounding on other things and try to say that, whatever.
In that very short video clip there, Deputy Kerr tries valiantly, but in my opinion, kind of the words were failing him to make the point that I'm going to make now. And I could be wrong. Maybe this isn't the point he was trying to make at all, but I'm going to use what he said there to make a point that I believe he may have been attempting to say there. And just the words failed him a little bit in that moment. And that is this. He talks about the need to deal with the here and now before we try to deal with other things and larger things and deeper things. And in a sense, I think he's very right, but I think he struggled expressing what he was trying to say, and that's this. Sometimes as humans, we see ourselves as so advanced because we're landing machines on Mars and the moon, and cars are ubiquitous all over our advanced roadways with little automatic lights that tell us when we can go and stop, and all of the little inventions and doodads that we've created that give us this feeling of like mental superiority. And while we have in fact managed all those things, flight and airplanes, all that stuff, and that's terrific, we've gotten to those way down the road things without dealing with some of the foundational things that come well before all these technological advancements that we all love so much. So, going to Mars and the moon and whatnot, when such simple day one things we haven't dealt with at all, like these racial issues, injustice. And I oftentimes compare it to the animal kingdom. We as humans, we look at the animal kingdom and we see all of that as something less than us. They're not as smart, they're not as evolved, they don't feel pain, or they don't, whatever argument we want to make in any given moment. Animals have figured out a basic truism of life. This is like a foundational truism that ensures the well-being of all animals. And they've got it worked out. And this is a foundational piece, a place where you start to build. And that's that you cannot use more natural resources than the world around you provides. That is a recipe for death for both your species, you yourself, your species, and the planet in which you live on. If you squeeze more out of it than it has to offer, you're going to kill it. And that seems so simple and foundational. And yet we as humans haven't learned that, or at least haven't instituted that into our way of thinking and living. Live in such excess, which is ultimately going to destroy this entire planet for us, the animals, the planet, and everything on it. Whereas animals, who are supposed to be so much less refined and have so much less understanding than us, are able to manage that exact thing in a way that humans have shown they cannot. And they use only those resources that the planet they live on avails to them. and they don't use more than they need. They don't gather up and hoard more than they need, and they don't live lives of excess consumption. And as a result, like that basic foundational thing, don't live a lifestyle that's going to end your life, while as humans have not. So while we might consider ourselves so much more advanced than animals, it's for silly reasons, because we can fly to the moon, but yet we can't take care of ourselves. Because if you live a lifestyle that's ultimately going to kill your planet and kill your species, then you're not dealing with the basics. You're just taking care of yourself and protecting your life, because you're too worried about consumption and the things and the accomplishments and landing on the moon. Those things are all great, but only after you deal with the basics and the foundational stuff, which we have ignored at the peril to ourselves, our planet, and everything else on it. Whereas animals, who are supposed to be so much less refined than us, seem to deal with that just fine at the expense of bridges across oceans and machines on the planet Mars. You can do both, but you have to have your foundation before you can build your building. You can't start with the building and build it on sand, which is what we've done by ignoring these foundational truths and while pushing forward. And I think that's what Deputy Kerr was talking about here when he said we can't move forward into these big things until we deal with the now. We have to have justice in this country as just merely, it's an enormous undertaking, but it's merely a step in a much larger process to getting us to a healthy, functioning country. These are the last public words of Deputy Clyde Kerr III. These were his deepest feelings. And he tells you in not so many words exactly what he's going to do. He tells you that he hopes what he's about to do will spur the change that he desires. And he begged for it to make a difference. It's clear from this long clip I'm about to show you, and I encourage you to watch it, because these are the last words of a man who believed the things he's saying deeply enough to do what he did just hours after uttering them. So I encourage you to listen to these words. Understand that while you may not agree with Clyde Kerr and everything he says, do understand that these words meant a great deal to him. And these beliefs were held with a great deal of conviction. There's a deeper level of finality and sadness to his words in this final clip. And he also makes it very clear that he does not want to do this at all. He does not want to do this. And he says, but no one else will step up. And it sounds a lot like he's saying that he felt as if he was left with no choice. But he definitely points out that no one seems to be doing anything. He puts an onus on each of us to use what he's about to do as a springboard to be the impetus for real systemic change, justice, the kind that we've been searching for since 1865. And if you go back and look at episode 1 of Be Fuck Kill, you'll see what I mean. I deeply understand the pain that Clyde Kerr is feeling for his fellow citizens, for his country, for the world. He also, in this final clip, once again hints as if this was all kind of destined and this was his purpose. Again, hints at the possibility that some higher power told him what to do or to do this. And he again points at a date about a week before he's making this video. He hints at some event that changed everything. Nothing's come out publicly about this, but I find it difficult to believe that there wasn't a note, some statement on his body, something, because clearly through these videos, he's trying to make a spectacle. He wants that spectacle to be the impetus for change. And these were the wishes, the final wishes of a man who knew he was dying. On a couple of different occasions throughout this clip, you'll see that he again is bordering on tears. These things he's talking about matter deeply to him, so deeply that he ultimately took his own life, hoping to be to inspire some change. And if taking a look at these clips tonight and kind of talking about these final wishes of Deputy Clyde Kerr can help be the impetus for change, then I'm all for it. While Clyde Kerr was no perfect man, clearly something that matters to me a great deal mattered to him a great deal, and that's justice. Take a look here at these. These are the final public words of Deputy Clyde Kerr III, father of two, and veteran of the United States Army, police officer, and man with deeply held convictions. Here's Deputy Kerr in his final words. Check this out.
And by my clock, 9:17 in the morning, and this is my last day at work. So, didn't give a notification, obviously, because this is the notification. You cannot. I don't believe this is not happenstance. I don't feel what I feel. I couldn't do what I'm going to do for it to be happenstance. There's no way that this is a mistake. Everything has a direction, has a purpose. I figured out what I was supposed to do. A lot of aspects, and people just want to cop out and say, oh, I don't have any control over it. I have control over what I'm going to do. I'm not saying or telling anybody to follow suit. Please understand what I'm saying. I am taking an active measure in what I want to see happen. I'm tired of me being a product of this environment and just reacting to it. I want possibly me and what I do to be enough that it causes a chain effect that it like be like, wow, damn, that meant something to him. I found out what mine was roughly a week ago. It was all good just a week ago, and it really was. I was big chilling. Not a care in the world. Had no problem whatsoever just going on with my life because I thought it was still going on. They're like, nope, right there. I'm like, where did that come from? The craziest thing about it is to try to keep up the appearance of, normal, knowing that what y'all are probably not gonna think is. I'm telling you, this is something that has to happen. And I was the one that's paid for it, and I don't want to do it. And you're thinking like, oh, okay, he wants. No, trust me, I would rather pass this baton to the next guy. I really would. If somebody else would step up, but I don't think anybody's in the mindset of doing it how like I think it should be done. Like, go through my life, go through it, dissect it. Like I said, not perfect. Look, I make 7 mistakes a day, and then I get out the bed and actually start my day. So I am not perfect. I am not saying that, but I want you to see that at least I tried, and I tried like as much as I possibly could, to the point that I'm like, what else could I possibly give? Like, what more could I have possibly done? Like, this is the greatest thing I think I can just like to stop people. And the thing about it is, I'm hoping it works. I was told that it's going to, so we'll see. And let the chips fall where they may afterwards, because I can't back down. Let's do this. All in. Because the stuff we've been doing, where's that gotten us? Right here. Just absolute boiling point chaos. And everybody's like, oh, well, that's just the way it is. Says who? Says who? Powers that be? What is your motivation? Why don't you check your heart? I've checked mine. I have checked mine. I value people. I do. I try to treat everybody with kindness and respect instead of doing what we're doing. It's not working. I'm telling y'all it's not working. You know it's not working. You know it's not working. Something in you has to shift to know that the course that we're on is not the right.
Clyde Kerr, in his final words, begged for all of us to be better, both to each other and individually. Be better. And that's obviously just one small part of what we need to do in all this. And he opens up this video by wanting to make sure that every viewer knows that he is not on drugs, there is not some traumatic event, and he is of right mind. He doesn't want you to think he's crazy. He doesn't want you to think he's drugged up or that he's, outside influences are forcing him to say and do these things. He wants you to know that he is of sound mind and body, and he's doing this with full understanding. So, and he wants to make sure that his viewers know that. He further goes on to mention that as recently as a week before making this video in the last days of January 2021, that he still had no idea that this was his path, and that he implies as if he was chosen, but I don't want to say that because he doesn't say that, but he certainly implies it. It was all a surprise to him in this last week that he came to understand what his purpose was, and sort of implies at times that God told him that he was supposed to do this because his death and these words in these videos are meant to change the world, and he's going to be his death and words would be the impetus for significant change, like he seeks in these videos. So there you have the final words of Deputy Clyde Kerr III of Louisiana, who on February 1st of 2021 walked up to the police department that he worked for, and while standing right outside, shot himself in the head and died. He said he knew for about a week he was going to do it, and he said something happened and because he wasn't expecting it all, and then something happened that changed everything. But if you look at the timeline of the videos we've looked at tonight, and you kind of think back to how he looked and sounded in May of 2020 when he made that video right after George Floyd's death, while he was very emotional in that video and on the brink of tears a number of times, he still seemed emotionally sturdy. I'll put it like that, and I don't know if that's the right phraseology or not. He was troubled, and he said as much. He said, "This vexes my spirit." When you look at the videos he made in the hours before his death, you see a changed man from that May of 2020 video. You see a man who, all those things that troubled him of May of 2020, that he saw no hope for any of it getting better. And he saw himself as a last final hope. And it was through this final act on February 21st of 2021 that Deputy Clyde Kerr III of Louisiana reached out to you and me, and in a very literal sense is begging us to be better, is begging us to force the politicians and the policymakers in this country to do better. The district attorneys, the judges, the police officers, the prosecutors, the politicians, the lawmakers, the legislative bodies, every one of them. Deputy Clyde Kerr is begging you with his last words to be better and to offer real justice to every single American. And it's not some unobtainable ask. It's something that we should all want. And anybody who doesn't, like Clyde Kerr says in the video, you're the problem. If you don't see the problem here, you're the problem. I hope you took the time to kind of ruminate on the words of Deputy Clyde Kerr tonight. Very much an imperfect man, and he says as much himself in the video, but a man with some deeply held convictions that hoped that this final act of his would make a difference. And he says as much. He says, I hope this makes a difference. I do too, Deputy Kerr. While I don't and would never have wished for his death, Since I never heard of him while he was alive, I surely do hope that his death can be given all the meaning that Deputy Clyde Kerr hoped it would. Episode 5 is going to follow in short order, and we're going to do a follow-up episode on the Capitol attacks and all the arrests and how the nonsense relating those attacks are playing out in real time right now today. And that'll be episode 5, and I may start recording that as soon as tomorrow, trying to get that out within a week from today. So do hit the subscribe button and subscribe to me here at YouTube. Go over and follow me on Twitter, MSWS Satori Wabi-Sabi. And do look forward to very soon. I'm going to be releasing my first book soon. And even sooner than that, I'm going to be releasing a large excerpt from the book in conjunction with episode 6 or 7 to be determined of Eat Fuck Kill the podcast, because the excerpt from the book and that podcast are going to work together and tell similar stories that kind of play off each other. I mostly made this podcast in the hopes of fulfilling the final wishes of Deputy Clyde Kerr, who wanted everyone to see this video that he made and wanted everyone to get justice. And those are the most honorable of intentions. So here we are honoring the life and death of Deputy Clyde Kerr III of Louisiana. Thank you very much for checking out this episode of Eat Fuck Kill. This is episode 4 of the podcast Eat Fuck Kill. I am your host, MSWS Satori Wabi-Sabi. Most appreciative of your attention. Peace.